And then I'm going to now stream. All right. So here we go. So we have a couple of people coming in on Zoom, and we should now also be streaming to LinkedIn any moment now, if not already. So we should start. So thank you so much, you beautiful people, with your very beautiful, colourful backgrounds, also joining us on today, the 21st of May, which is the UN Day of World Cultural Diversity, which is, you know, I think one of the most important things that as immigration professionals, we have an opportunity to contribute to. So I am joined here today by the amazing Ben, Jim, Daniel, and Blayne, and I am going to ask you to introduce yourselves because I don't think I will do anybody justice. So starting from top to bottom, Ben, you're at the top of my screen. I don't know.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, panelists and anyone watching this. It's always nice to engage with you. Some of you might know me. For those of you who don't, my name is Blayne Sookia. I am a global immigration specialist. I've worked in the industry for just over 10 years, so I'm feeling quite nostalgic at the moment. And my job is to work with providers and immigration lawyers around the world to help facilitate the visa process. But I also have a kind of general interest in immigration that maybe I'll go into in a bit later on. But yeah, it's great to speak with all the other panelists and hopefully engage with some of the people watching in as well. So look forward to it.
Thanks, Ben. Jim, who are you? Who are you?
Who am I? That's a deep question on a Friday. I'm Jim Alexander. I'm the managing shareholder at the law firm of Maggio and Cater, which is based in Washington, D.C. I've been working in the field of immigration since 1994. My background is kind of, I guess, unique in that I grew up in the middle of the US, which isn't really known for its embracing of diversity, but I've always felt like diversity is a safe place for me. And I've always tried to encourage diversity and celebrate the different cultures from which we all come.
Yeah, understand. Daniel, tell us about your background.
Sure. And I actually like the way that Jim took that he included the Cultural Diversity Awareness Day as part of his biography. So maybe we could all kind of do that as well. So I am Daniel Tostado. I'm not Franco. I'm just American. I'm an American that works here in France. I am a dual qualified US lawyer and French avocat. So I practice French inbound immigration. And I focus on private clients. And then with regards to the twist that Jim presented there with the cultural background, growing up in San Diego, California, there's a very strong Latino presence. I'm quarter Latino, and so I always appreciated the stories of travel of my grandpa, and then also on my mother's side, that being so fundamental in the idea of what is it to be an American, is that we are a nation of immigrants and that we've all come from somewhere. So that certainly stuck with me. And when I started moving abroad, then I really started strongly identifying with the other immigrants and a passion for them that led me to becoming an immigration attorney. Yeah,
it's so interesting how people came into this industry. And then Blayne, tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, my name is Blayne Kumar. I'm the CEO of Bright Immigration. We are a Canadian-based immigration firm, and I have the absolute privilege to help run and manage this organization with a great team. I'm also a founder of a company called Improved, which is a technological company in immigration, and that assesses people for Canadian immigration. And my baby is Brighter Together, which is a charity, a recently registered charity that really is there to help promote diversity and providing avenues for immigrants, newcomers to get back to Canada. So, but yes, thank you for having me as well today, Sophie, and for arranging all of this. Appreciate it.
It's a super big pleasure. And actually the entire reason I wanted to do this webinar was because Blayne and I connected after I was talking to Roman Zelichenko, and then you and I were talking and you were telling me about Brighter Together, and I thought this is such a genius idea and quite inspirational and amazing. And then I thought, oh, Blayne should get to meet people like Ben, because Ben is really into all of this kind of stuff as well. And then I thought, you know, if they were going to have a conversation, surely that conversation would be interesting for everyone else. And then I was like, but Jim should be there, because Jim and I have always talked so much about artists and, you know, the work that you've done with artists. And then I thought, oh, you know, Fiona was telling me about Daniel and stuff that he's doing with people in France. So I thought, if we're going to have a conversation, we might as well do it with everybody. And I was just trying to look at my LinkedIn comments at the same time. That's why the feedback went a bit weird. Sorry, I messed up my audio. But I would also really encourage anybody who's watching this to please comment. And, you know, it would be nice if we could be as kind of interactive as possible. So anyway, so what we wanted to talk about today was what you guys are doing. What we're hoping to achieve in today's conversation is to talk about how it is possible for people in our field to be helpful to the wider community, and what you guys are doing as a sort of starting point, and how other people can get involved. And also, I wanted to get a bit of the why in there as well. You know, why should anybody bother, apart from wanting to be a good person? You know, why else? What are the reasons why we might want to do this? So I don't know who wants to kind of kick it off, but we need to know the things that you guys are doing to start with, is the first point.
So
Don't be shy, go on.
So, just so everyone knows, Maggio and Cater, our firm has been committed to giving back to the community ever since its inception. We've always done a lot of pro bono work, and in all areas of the community, really. You know, that could be pro bono work for refugees or for artists. We have as Sophie mentioned, our firm does a lot of pro bono work for artists. We work with the Gala Hispanic Theater in Washington, D.C., where we make sure that they can bring in all their artists, their dancers from around the world at no cost to the organization, because we believe that our community is richer and stronger the more diverse it is. That diversity isn't something that should be shied away from, but it really should be embraced, because we're all better and richer if we can recognize our diversity and grow from it. So, you know, I've had a really great experience in the field of immigration law, working with people from all different cultures. And I think that, one, there's a financial benefit to giving back to your community. It's a way to promote your firm. But also, you know, a lot of times in immigration, we're working with corporations and businesses, and there it's very cut and dry. I think when you give back, there's a certain emotional payment or karmic benefit that is also just as valuable as monetary benefit.
Yeah. And do you find, Jim, as well, surely it's also from a kind of human, like I don't know how to say this, like a staffing standpoint, like surely the lawyers and the paralegals and the people that you have working in Maggio and Cater must find it a rewarding and good place to work because of the stuff that you guys do. Like, I always think that's a huge thing, that the people care about the company they work for and believe that it cares about the rest of the world as well, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I think that they really take pride in our ability to, I mean, not to boast, but really sometimes save people's lives. I mean, literally these people's lives are in the balance a lot of times, and they don't have the resources to be able to take care of themselves. And so when you are able to make that kind of connection to people, or for people, it's pretty amazing. I'll give you one example, and I think I've shared this with Sophie. There's this one particular artist that came to our firm years ago and was undocumented. And I always talk about his artwork and how his artwork evolved over time. When he was undocumented, his artwork was very heavy and lots of crosses and martyr symbols. And now he's a citizen, and he sells his pieces for like over $20,000 a piece, but they're completely different. They're very light and ephemeral. And you can see the impact that you have on people's lives by being able to give them that security, you know, and knowing that their tomorrow is going to be a good one. Yeah.
I've told so many people that story, you know, because I find it very moving. All right, Blayne, tell us about Brighter Together. I think we need to know it, because this is you're coming at it from quite a different angle, right?
Yeah, like it's coming, I think we all have our experiences, and I like to just first start off by saying that, immigration's a very stressful job for us. It's a tough job, and just like any other business or job, it has its stresses. But just take a moment to reflect back and know we're making a difference, and know that we are literally becoming and helping people change lives and generations ahead. So for all the immigration professionals I speak to, when you have your down days or you're just not doing too well, just remember that we have the privilege to go to work every day and make a difference in this world. So just want to start off by saying that first. Brighter Together. So Brighter Together, let me explain a little bit, give you a backstory of what Brighter Together is. So before I started Bright Immigration, I used to do recruitment, international recruitment. I worked heavily in the oil and mining industries primarily. Canada's a vast country, but the two provinces that are primarily focused on that are Alberta and Saskatchewan. And when people think Canada, just like any other country, they think of the major cities. Well, these aren't the major cities. So, I used to bring in international people from Mexico, Algeria, Eastern Europe, Africa, throughout to work in these industries. And not only did I facilitate the recruitment and the immigration paperwork, but I would also pick them up at the airport, get them, make sure they have their place settled, make sure their food's in. And I would personally, I started off, I was doing it. And you build a bond with them. And, I'm also trying to also explain and get them involved into the culture, because, they're not coming to Toronto. They're going to a small rural town, anywhere from 5 to 50,000 people. Huge majority of the residents are multi-generational Canadians, usually European descendants. And they're in that environment. And unfortunately, even and I'm sure many of you have an opinion of Canada being a very warm, accepting environment and country. And listen, it does a pretty good job of it. But even in Canada, I get calls from, my guy who's in the hospital. He got beaten up because he's, essentially due to him being Mexican, or whatever the case is. And, you hear these stories, and it kind of drove, this was years ago. I must mind you, this was years ago, but it's always it planted a seed in me that there must be something. And even my own experiences, myself being a person of color and going through the journey, and understanding that, my perception when it comes to certain factors, when it comes to just people of diversity, it has a lot to do with just not understanding. There's a lot of elements involved that aren't so cut and dry sometimes, right? So, and it made me realize that, the best way I interact, and when I go to those same communities, I have a pretty good experience. And the reason why, I know hockey, I can relate, I'm a social, I could speak to them, I could get out there. And that protects me, in other words. And it made me realize that, the sentiment of diversity has to be looked at. And I was thinking about, how do we make a difference here? How do we make a change? And how do we make it a win-win-win situation? And Brighter Together was formulated years ago, actually. It's funny, because when I started Bright Immigration, I looked back on my notes and I found Brighter Together notes about this future charity that I wanted to establish. But essentially what Brighter Together is it provides an avenue for newcomers, established immigrants, people who've come here, even, children of immigrants, an avenue to get back to Canada. And the way we do that is Brighter Together funds projects for Canadian charities who serve the Canadian public. And we don't just provide money and just say, here's money. We facilitate solutions to their problems. So our approach is, we have a charity. What is your problem as an organization that is hindering your ability to facilitate your service? We want to raise money for that project. We want to raise it. We want to make sure it's done well, it's implemented, and it helps your organization to continue servicing that your people, your demographics and your community. Sorry. Now, the good thing about Brighter Together is that it doesn't matter where you are. It could be in the smallest communities in Northern Canada. It could be in downtown Toronto. It could go across and it could service any cause, whether it's animals, whether it's Indigenous groups, whether it's addictions, whether it's women shelters. It's vast, and it's meant to do that because it's meant to be inclusive. Our job here is having people who love Canada, who call it a home, just as I do, and who want to get back to Canada and to simply say thank you, in other words as well. And what we do is, when we fund this project, once it's successfully funded, we then take that message of that successfully funded project and we promote that message in that community. So by virtue, what we're trying to do here is immigrants have helped build this or help donate a stove for this food shelter right in your local small community, brought to you by immigrants and diversity, essentially. And what my hope is with this is slowly but surely, it's going to add to the psyche of people's diversity. People have a I think many of us would agree that the general public sometimes thinks that immigrants just come and take plenty away from the country and not give back. Well, this turns that whole idea upside down. So that is one of the main focuses for Brighter Together, and that is the premise of what we've been building. Now, interestingly enough, giving back. I started my conversation by being grateful for what we do. Folks, the knowledge that we have changes lives. You could change a life tomorrow. I change a life almost every time I'm in an Uber sometimes, when I'm at Tim Hortons, Tim Hortons is coffee shop in Canada.
You know what Tim Hortons did.
So just keep in mind that you can always make a difference, especially when you have the knowledge we do. But even going beyond that, with Brighter Together, a couple of things I just want to add about the cause of Brighter Together. One thing that I'm very passionate about is transparency of Brighter Together. So what I mean by that is every single dollar that is donated to Brighter Together goes directly to fund a project. That's how it works. Now, how does that work? Well, our firm, Brighter Migration, forks out the resources to make sure that that could happen. Now, it is with every bit of my intention that it continues to do that. Now, I cannot speak. Who knows how big this goes? Maybe it gets out of our hands and we just can't. I can't speak for the future. I can only speak for now. But that is something. But if you go on brightertogether.ca, you'll find some projects that we've done, and you'll see that we show how much the cost was, what was it raised, and exactly what was done. And just to give you folks an idea of some of the projects we've done so far, and we're just starting out, it's been a grassroots movement. We built an outdoor shed for a women's shelter. They basically had a problem with baby strollers. They couldn't store it. The fire department didn't like it because it was in the alleyway, in the hallways. So we built them an outdoor shed that was able to store the baby strollers. We raised money for a really solid COVID shields for a neurological autistic development therapy group. We have renovated a room for youth without shelters. We're currently working on a project right now that I just saw come across my table earlier this week. I got excited about it. I was like, and what they want to do, they need $1,500 to basically raise money to train 15 of their staff on CPR and first aid. So that way, because there's been instances where people needed first aid and that type of service, and they weren't able to help them enough before ambulance services came, and they felt that that was a problem. So these are the types of projects that we would like to fund and we want to stick to. And again, it's a win-win-win, because not only are we helping these charities achieve or help them operate more efficiently or help them achieve goals. Another one, by the way, is the software. We're looking to finance a software for 1-year licensing. That's going to help them reach out to the donors more. That's going to help that one assistant do another job that could help facilitate that. So these are the types of projects we like to do and promote, and it's a win-win, because not only does it help the charity, it helps the people they serve, or animals, or whatever or any cause they serve, but it also takes a messaging that we need as a country, and we use that messaging to continue to promote the positivity of diversity. So that's what brought on Brighter Together.
So what I think as well is, I feel like there is a link, or there's a sort of echo from what Jim, from what I was saying, what Jim was saying. When you do something good for somebody else, you get some benefits. Like, even if you do it from an altruistic point of view, you get some benefits, some tangible benefits back for yourself as well. And I feel like, maybe, I don't know what I want to say, but the visibility. Well, it seems to me like what you're trying to do is make the benefits of migrants into society more visible and more tangible and more obvious to people. Because I think also, as immigration professionals and lawyers, we know, anybody who reads the statistics can easily see that the net contribution of migrants to societies is positive, from an economic and financial and pretty much every point of view. There was a US census just now, right? Like, very clearly saying that the population is decreasing and aging, and you're going to need more immigrants and all that kind of stuff. Like, we all know that, but most people, I think, possibly don't see that. So it seems like what you're trying to do, Blayne, is make it more obvious. Make it like a buggy shelter that somebody can actually like touch and feel, right?
Well, Sophie,
yeah.
What I really think about that small community with 10,000 people, right? In Canada, there's a huge push for rural communities to start bringing in more immigration. But I'm telling these rural communities, from a fabric standpoint, they're not necessarily best equipped. And remember the earlier story I explained to the foreign workers, they left. Right. So and that is going to be a big problem, because these communities have to fight with the major, we call them MVPs, Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. MTV, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, the major cities. That's what they're competing with. Once they're not comfortable in those communities, they're going to want to go to those big cities, right? But my point is that it's only 5,000, 10,000 people. A social media promotion to promote that story in such a small community, and if we do it a couple times a year, and that could make a difference. That's one of the other big factors that we're looking at focusing on as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting, because I never would have thought of doing things that way. And honestly, when I've thought about it, what you're doing, I think it's amazing and I love it. The one slight small thing I have about it is that I'm a bit uncomfortable with the idea of immigrants having to be so much better and nicer and always be the good guys. I feel like that's a bit unfair. Just because you're the guy with the work permit, or you're the one with the residence permit, why do you have to be the perfect one who's also building bike shelters on top of everything else you've already been through? But on the other hand, it works, and it allows people to see the good that having a different and bigger and more diverse community can have. Then go for it, I think.
Yeah, I guess in another way of saying that, and I say this gently, but friendship takes time and energy.
Yeah, right, exactly. On both sides.
On both sides,
yeah. Right. Go on,
another way to give back to the community, and an important part of the immigrant story, which is integration. And one of our founding partners, Candace Cater, she worked in the HIV community. And she realized that she was not going to be able to prevent the spread of HIV in the Latino community unless she started giving young people a sense of a better tomorrow, because they were making decisions for right now, as opposed to thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to have a career, I want to have a family, etc. And I want to have a productive life. And so she started a nonprofit called Identity, which first started working with Latino youth on health education, but then it spread. And the organization now works with the community to help the Latino youth who are moving here from Central America to integrate into their high schools and to make sense of the different worlds that they encounter. In high school, it is a completely different culture than the culture that they have at home. And helping the families also understand the cultural differences that are going on, but then also reaching out to the community. And so I think that, Blayne is doing that same thing, where you're bringing people together and allowing them that opportunity to understand each other and know that we're not that different, right? So there's
the cause for optimism that one finds as well. So if you look at, for example, the Brexit vote, I feel like I'm so bored of talking about Brexit, but if you look at the Brexit vote, the vote to leave the EU was much higher in places where there were far fewer EU nationals resident there. In most of the kind of metropolitan areas where there's a lot of diversity and a lot of people kind of living all side by side, but actually the Remain vote was stronger, wasn't it? I think that's right, Ben. Yeah.
Oh,
you're on mute.
Sorry. I knew that was going to happen. That's why I didn't do it. And no, I think you were right with what you said. It feels like a long time ago, but that's correct.
It was a different lifetime.
Very much so.
But Ben, tell us about your stuff, because you have a few irons in the fire, right?
Yeah, I want to start, before I say what I've been thinking about or doing. I want to start by it's like 4 o'clock on a Friday. I'm just going to be honest. Like about a year ago, and I said I've worked in the industry for 10 years, and about a year ago, I think this is a common thing. but I became very bored. I was bored. I was so bored of corporate immigration, and it was the same thing. You know, you do different countries, even if when you're doing a global job, at a certain point, it becomes boring. It becomes the same thing, maybe the same people. And I love what I do. I love the people that are involved, that I connect with. But you know, let alone one country, even if you're doing the work, the whole of global immigration, after a certain number of years, you get bored and saturated. And you know, sometimes it becomes very interesting. You get to go to conferences and maybe travel, and that's very exciting. But even then, you get to a point where, isn't it the same? You know, it's the same topics, the same people. And I was ready. I came very close, I contemplated very seriously just doing something differently. And I was interested in things like teaching. And I went to kind of open evenings and that sort of thing. And but I didn't want to leave either, because you and I and everyone on this panel has that connection, especially with the people that we know. It's like, even when I was ready to do something else, I couldn't leave, and I didn't know why that was the case. And I spent a lot of time by myself reflecting. And so what came into my head was, for the first time, I don't know how or why, but I realized that I work in an industry that's very much corporate immigration. And for the first time, it connected the fact that my parents are migrants. They chose to come here 50 or 60 years ago. And I never asked them ever what it was like to come from Mauritius, in a small island in Africa, to London in the 1960s, and the experiences they had, good and bad, as teenagers. My mum, you know, she had to go by boat to go back to Mauritius the first time. And I thought, why have I never asked this? Why have like, how come I love immigration, although I'm bored, but I never actually asked people
Never
that have
joined
gone.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hang on, the global mobility, yeah, it's business, but why should it exclude people that migrate out of choice? It's not just expats, and it's not just refugees. And the boredom stems from the fact that I believe, and maybe to a certain extent now, there is a lack of diversity in the industry. Immigration is often about the EU and often about the US, and maybe it's interesting to get different perspectives, but also different people. I mean, we speak about migration, we know about the corporate side, but you know, shouldn't we involve or have conversations like the ones that I had with my parents about what it's like to move? Just because, you know, for I think immigration is much broader than just corporate immigration or refugees. And so in terms of what I do, it's nothing at all compared to what Jim and Blayne and Danielle. So it's amazing just to be on a kind of conversation with them. But the idea I had, and starting, is to try and have conversations and give more of a voice to people who are actual migrants.
Yeah.
So I started like a YouTube channel called The Migrant to basically try and reimagine what it is, the word migrant, because in the UK, perhaps in other countries, it's different or similar. In the UK, the word migrant has negative connotations. Usually it's people suffering or people on a boat and something very difficult. But what I'd like to do is actually do away with terms, you know, to a certain extent, that set aside the people that have these rich, you know, the assignments and the kind of amazing packages. And also not just, you know, of course, we want to include the dialogue and the discussion about refugees and people suffering as well. But what I want to do is reimagine the word migrant so that they're all one. Like, in a way,
Yeah.
we are all, I believe, migrants. And Sophie, you are also, right? Like, I don't know how many people know your story, but you are also a migrant. You've also lived in other countries. And I think that's really interesting. So I'm keen to hear about the stories about other people. Maybe even the story about you, because you lived abroad. And I don't know if you've ever talked about yourself on this, but I think that's very interesting. Not to flip around the conversation, but I think if we can try and find a way where we all see ourselves as the same people, that would make the industry more interesting, and more diversity means more innovation, and more innovation means progress. And I suppose that's what I'm trying to do, just raise a platform and give more opportunities for different kind of conversations.
and make people connect, right? So make people, because I think there's a few things. There's this kind of artificial disconnect between different types of migrants, you know, between so-called expats and then so-called skilled workers. I mean, this is the thing we were talking about the other day with Errol and Marina, you know, so-called skilled and so-called highly qualified and economic, you know, all of that stuff. And really everything is all about people going to another country to take an opportunity which may be better or more interesting than the thing that they're leaving at home. And some people are driven by kind of force and need and have really no choice. And some people are going because they're trying to make a better life for themselves and their families. But everybody's just a person moving to another country, right?
Yeah. So can I ask you, like, has your travel experience in living in, is it Japan you lived in other countries?
I lived in, so I'm really boring. I'm English and I have no interesting cultural background, but I went to Russia when I was 18 for 6 months. And then I did Chinese at university. So I lived in China for about a year. And then I thought it would be good to go to Japan because the story between China and Japan is very complicated. I thought it would be good to understand Japan. So then I lived in Japan for 2 years. And then I lived in Spain for 3 years.
That's amazing.
So I've been trying to make up for my boring background by running around the world.
But did those experiences change your perspective on immigration at all? I'm just curious.
Well, you know, it's interesting what Jim was saying about growing up in the Midwest. Like I grew up in London, which is very culturally diverse, but my entire family, my personal background is, yeah, like I say, extremely boring. But all of my best friends at school from the youngest possible age were from different countries and different backgrounds. So actually I grew up like my closest best friend ever, my like my sister is Jewish, and I spent every Friday night eating dinner at her house, you know. So actually I can even speak like a tiny bit of Hebrew. And then my best friend at school was Indian, so her parents were always speaking to her in Hindi, and I always thought that was kind of cool, you know. So I don't know, but
okay. I want to make one comment, and I feel that I am a diverse person. I hope I would disagree with you. I think you are diverse. You've lived in other countries. You've tried. You put yourself in a position of vulnerability. So I'm sorry, I feel strongly about you saying you're not diverse. You are diverse, Sophie. You're diverse.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. It is interesting living in other places. And also the other thing that I find interesting about it, which I think has nothing to do with just living in a different place from where you grew up, even if it's from a position of extreme privilege. So all of the countries I have lived in, I've chosen to go to, and I've gone either as a student where I didn't care about money, or I've gone with a job where I got paid. But it's very isolating and lonely to be sometimes in another country before you know anybody. You know, when I was in Spain, my first son, who's 13 now, was born in Spain. And I remember I was super pregnant. I was quite ill. So I was, I had all these problems, and I had to go to the doctor, and I didn't understand how the doctor system worked. And my Spanish was not very good. And I was pregnant, and I hadn't slept for like a month. I was really in like a terrible state. And I remember sitting in the waiting room and just crying because I didn't understand how to. I didn't know if I'd missed my appointment. I was a bit late, and I didn't know if I'd missed the appointment. I didn't understand how to go and ask, and I was a bit too nervous, and I thought they might laugh at my Spanish, and it was all terrible. And all of that stuff, I think, gives you an appreciation of when you're in another country, even if you can speak the other language a little bit, and even if you know other people a bit, and even if you have a job, it's really bloody difficult sometimes to stand up and go and talk to the person. You have to have a lot of courage, even when you have so much behind you, let alone if you're running with your shoes on your back, so I think people should understand that. And actually this is a good segue to stop talking about me. And Daniel, I think you should tell us what you do, because you work with people who are really facing a terrible time, right?
Yeah, certainly. So I am, as I mentioned before, here based in Paris. About 3 winters ago, I was contacted by the pastor of the American church, who was trying to figure out, he was contacted by a refugee that was out of Norway that was coming to France, and they're saying, okay, we need to find housing for this guy. And so he turned to me and said, where do people usually go when they need to find housing and they're living on the margins? And I had to be honest and say, it's Paris. There is no extra, no one has an extra bedroom. Everyone's already counting their square meters of their apartment. We're chronically short on housing in France. In Paris in particular. And so the idea was then to be born that I would make a homeless shelter for refugees. out of the gym of the American Church. And so I got really excited about the idea because I used to work in homeless shelters before in the US, and kicked it off. We got the insurance to approve it. We got the police department to come by and verify that it's okay. And then we opened up the gym and now we call the project the 100 Nights of Welcome, because it's during the 100 coldest nights of winter that we take people in off the street. And it's approximately 15 refugees. They're all gentlemen, they're all men.
Yeah.
And we call them gentlemen to not kind of put labels on them or, kind of class them as the refugees, the whatever. Because gentlemen sounds like a very polite and inclusive term. And then, we house them during the winter, and then come spring, when it's the early part of March, then we say, well, we can't keep on going, but we thank you for the time you spent with us, and we're glad that you got through winter. And then they kind of go on their way and try to relaunch themselves. This past winter was particularly tricky because we had COVID. And so the American Church was entirely closed. And so we fundraised and ended up getting about 18,000 euros of funding to put them all up in hostels for winter. So we had 15 dudes living in a hostel in Paris. And of course, the hostel prices were like 10% of what they usually are, because there's no tourism going on right now. And what was really brilliant with this time around, compared to previous winters, was that we created a community that wasn't there before. So it wasn't that they were just coming in the evening to sleep over and take a shower and get a hot meal and then wake up the next morning at 7 a.m. and go out. It was that they were living together for 3 months. And our gentlemen are mostly from Afghanistan, with a handful of Iranians, and then a lot of sub-Saharan Africa. So we've got Sudanese, and then I call them the sea countries, everything that's Cote d'Ivoire, Chad, Congo Brazzaville, and Cameroon, Central Africa. It was a very fruitful experience. You've all talked about the value that you can get personally from giving back. I think it's the meaning that we find in life is taking our skill set and then using those to help those that are living most on the margin, get them more included. And my particular experience from the cultural diversity side of things was that I'm quite plugged into the American expat community here in Paris. It's relatively strong in numbers. And it's relatively insular, because if you've ever tried to meet French people and include yourself in their life, it can be a very insular society. And so what was neat out of this experience was that a lot of these folks in the American expat community do have good hearts and want to give back. And starting the 100 Nights of Welcome project was their chance to have that avenue to give back and to sleep over at a shelter and kind of make a meal and bring it to the gentleman. Kind of break down that insider-outsider divide for us to be those insiders and to include them. And then they might show up with a paper saying, hey, look, I've got my appeal for for my asylum was refused last week, but I've got my appeal coming up. Can you look at my documents? And the skill set that we have in our field is legal. I mean, what I was doing in that sense was housing. It had nothing to do with legal. But as you've all said before, the skills that we have is precious. For those that are trying to work their way to becoming insiders, the knowledge that we have is gold, and it has such strong value for them. So that's certainly where I've been able to kind of take my own little light and make it shine here in the Paris community.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's amazing, And then do you think, how long have you been doing this for now?
We've done it for 3 winters, and then we're looking forward to bringing it back this next winter, as of early December, out at the American Church again, assuming that the world is open back up again and that the situation is back to normal. Yeah.
And do you kind of create relationships with these people kind of in the long term, do you think? So will you be able to see if these people you're helping now, if they go on and their appeals are successful and they become is it too ridiculous to say that those are the sorts of people who might be joining a program like Blayne's a few years down the line?
It could very well be. And it's funny that you said, are you still in contact? I got a phone call in the middle of my little spiel from one of the gentlemen. This season, much more than the prior seasons, we were really able to sink in connections and not just be like a very brief moment of interaction, but just regular visits. One of the beautiful things that came out of it was that it was a moment of respite. Sometimes when you're working with folks that are on the margin, like refugees, what they could really just use is a tweak vacation where they don't have to worry about their problems for 2 weeks. That would be lovely if they could take a break from sleeping in a tent, or they could just like get away for a moment and kind of come back. And 100 Nights of Welcome this winter was kind of that. It was 3 months for them to get their feet under them and say, okay, I've got some time to save up a little bit of money. And we sat down with them. We said, look, like group yourself into groups of 4 and try to figure out housing, because when you're on your own, you're not going to beat the street. You're going to be on the sidewalk still. But if you can group together, and scrounge up between some of you, then a rent at 500 euros a month could be doable. So it was a chance for a lot of them to kind of rebound off of a tent city that's outside of the north of Paris, through shelter for 3 months, and then coming out of that into regular housing. And I think that was a chance to catch their air, and then eventually, as Blayne was saying, be able to finally get integrated, then be able to eventually participate in the community, give back.
So Blayne, I am interested though. I'm still interested in because your charity, Brighter Together, is something I've never heard of anybody doing that before, and I think it's amazing. Like I keep saying, I think it's amazing because I feel like changing the discourse around what immigration is and what an immigrant is, and can, from being a person, only to be kind of pitied and helped, to being a person who is a full human, an actual human being who needs to be helped, but also can give help back in some way. I think that's an amazing kind of circle to close. But also, if it were me, I think I'd be more inclined to help other immigrants than maybe to help like the local people in my small town. But do you not, like, maybe I'm just very selfish? And
You know what? You know what? One thing is, as a business owner as well, you have to be malleable, and you have to, actually the original vision of Brighter Together was immigrant communities helping Indigenous communities in Canada. That was the original idea of it. And then it kind of morphed into something else. So to answer your question, it may morph again. The only reason I'm just sticking along this dialogue right now is because it does clarify the messaging in terms of, at least that's where it is, but I'm really malleable. Daniel, just before when we did our call the other day, I found it really interesting. If you could just quickly talk, I think it'd be so valuable for the people on the call, about the refugee process in Paris, about that lull time that's there. If you could touch on that, because I believe that's what inspired you to help it. That was what A, creates this problem, and B, what inspired you to actually address the problem, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's certainly, you could say it's a broken procedure. I think it's broken in a lot of countries. But when you arrive for the first 6 months, you do not have the right to work. You may have the right to housing. And in France, as France is a social democratic country, there's not that sense of NGOs or organizations as you might find in America. In America, there's hundreds of Casa de Amistad, Casa de Esperanza, all these different, many casas, casitas. In France, there's much less of a volunteer culture because people are already assuming that they're paying high taxes and that the state should be taking care of it. And so that creates a burden on the state to then go out and house folks. But if they're not housing everybody, there's 3,000 homes that live in Paris. Approximately half of them are housed during the winter, and approximately half are foreigners. If those needs aren't being met, then no one else is stepping forward and meeting those needs. And I think that's part of the beauty of being part of the American expat community here in France, is that we carried over that mentality of like, oh, sure, service hours and pro bono and kind of plug in and serve. And so we were, as the Americans living in France, catering to housing the Afghanis that are here in Paris. There were some French that plugged in, but the majority of people that were volunteering were foreigners themselves. So I guess we fit into your model, Blayne.
Right. And this, I think the whole purpose is the best way to address, possibly the best way for France to address the problem is if the populace sees that it's a problem and wants to address that problem. And the only way to get that populace to see that problem and to want to fix it is if they respect the problem. And the only way to make them respect the problem is you have to bring it to the front door and make them say, look, so, I think it's a full circle. And I think, Donald Trump, I'm surprised we haven't said Trump once in this call. It's 45 minutes.
Relieved.
But you know what? Trump really set, that whole experience with Donald Trump being in office and how fast things change and how quickly things could move. That I like to think that could also go the other way. So
I think so too. Exactly. I think all of the effort and the kind of noise that goes into saying people are other, if people, we can put all of that effort into saying that people are the same, that we have more in common than we have that separates us, then surely that makes a difference, and just if there could be more people doing this. So look, we only have 10 minutes left really, but how would you because I feel like we have so many different things here. We have like Jim's got an entire amazing law firm doing all of this stuff. Like Blayne, you've literally set up a charity, you know, and Daniel is like out helping people like the whole time, you know. I feel like, what do we want to say to people who want to do something like, and who don't have an entire law firm and aren't going to go and set up a charity of their own and all that, because everybody's human, you know, we're all busy and we've got families and children and all that type of stuff. Like, what can people do if they want to be helpful and they want to do something to try and turn the needle a little bit towards the empathy zone and the, you know, caring about people's zone? Then what should they do?
What's amazing about this panel is that everyone's made it very personal, and I think that's the key to success. It has to ring true to you and your story and what are your motivations. And if you look inside and think about, you know, what's important to you, you'll find the answer. And, you know, to Daniel's point, I think we're really lucky in the US in a lot of ways, in that we have all these nonprofits that are available. There's so many opportunities, so many organizations that need assistance. But just like everyone on this panel here, don't feel like you have to look for the right nonprofit. You can do it yourself. You know, like, believe in yourself. If you have an idea, this is a great opportunity. And listening to everyone talk, the one thing that I feel is common is that when we give back this way, it really allows us to get in touch with our humanity. And I feel like, first of all, that's a great thing, karmic thing, but it helps us professionally too. If we can, you know, understand and be empathetic to others, that makes us a better advocate, you know, or a service provider. So it's really important that we do this. I think it's an investment in our professional skills.
Yeah.
And to echo Jim, like, yeah, it's personal, but it's absolutely personal. And remember, we have knowledge, and that knowledge is critical. So at the very least, you know, one thing is, actually our first project was a women's shelter. And, you know, it's only till you go in, and it's only when you speak to them, then you come to realize 90% of their client, they call them clients, are immigrants. And you know what they really needed more than that shed was a workshop on immigration. They needed to understand, a lot of them were escaping abusive spousal relationships, spousal sponsorships, terrified. Just for them to even get to that house, they thought they were going to get deported because, you know, they thought the partner, you know, just to calm them down, let them know that's not right, you can't do that, like, you know. So, and you'd be so surprised how many people need that help. So I think at the very least, your knowledge and that perspective, and going back and to echo Jim's about the humanity, and, you know, I think, I'm sure we as immigration professionals, we can kind of all admit to the fact that sometimes we just deal with so much of the same stuff, just like doctors and across any boards, you know, we get desensitized, and just a little bit, and sometimes more than others. But at the same time, I hear what Daniel's doing, and it pulls a lot of strings on my heart, though. So, you know, but still, it's a good opportunity for us to, I guess, get realigned and you know, have a little bit more empathy, because, you know, sometimes I even catch myself where I should have more empathy, but it's just I have to deal with 15 clients today, you know. So it gives you the opportunity to also get, it's almost like exercising or meditating. It's almost its own method of doing that. By giving back is giving yourself that space, that mental space that you need, and the emotional space that you need for you to realign as a professional.
Yeah, and I think you're right that the knowledge, you know, not only having knowledge but being able to communicate it is a very valuable thing. You know, somebody was saying on LinkedIn the other day about COVID vaccinations. You know, they were saying in this country, I think it was in the US, COVID vaccinations are available to everybody, whether they have legal immigration status or not. Is that true in your country? And everybody who replied said, yeah, it is true in our country, because obviously, you know, COVID doesn't respect whether you've got a work permit or residence permit or not. But I think it's not very widely known. And I was just thinking while you were talking, a very useful thing to do would be to simply say to people who are undocumented, who are scared of going to get their vaccine done because they're scared they're going to get caught and deported, you know, or people who are scared of leaving their horrible husbands because they're scared they're going to get deported. If they know that there are legal and legitimate avenues for them to receive the support that they deserve, then that's a helpful thing, you know, just make that. Yeah, Ben, I feel like you're about to say something.
No, I was just going to add in terms of what people can do. I think it's such a common discussion now about people searching for purpose, and then when you're searching for purpose, people say, "Oh, what can I do?" Before you think about what you can do, if you want to find out about your purpose, you need to know who you are. You need to know what it is that lights your fire. And then once you know that, you can kind of start thinking about whether it's speaking about it or whether it's volunteering or small things. No one is going to change the world. So I would suggest that it might be like you know, Blayne and Danielle and Jim are actually doing very big things. It might be just a small thing that someone wants to do on a Saturday or a couple of hours a week. So there's no need to change the world. It's just something that appeals to you. It appeals to your heart in a way. And to get to that point, I would encourage everyone to kind of think about their history and their identity a little bit more. You know, what in the years before has meant something to them, and then connect on that side to do something small. Connect your professional with your personal is really important thing to do, I think.
And do you know what I should have done is I should have asked, I don't know if Lachi is still watching this webinar, but Lachi, I should have asked you to come and talk, because she does amazing stuff with Bulgaria, which is where Lachi is originally from, starting pretty small and getting bigger and bigger. And the amount of people's lives who Lachi has improved is you know, getting into the kind of double, triple, quadruple figures pretty fast, actually. You know, starting from just wanting to be a little bit helpful, actually things can snowball fairly quickly, I think, you know. Yeah, actually, you're brilliant.
To Ben's point, you know, small things, what we're doing today, talking about diversity. And maybe it's talking about diversity to people that may not be embracing diversity, and just having that opening conversation to give them an opportunity to see how richer their life can be if they embrace diversity and they stop putting the walls up, and literally and figuratively. That I think that just discussions are really, really important and so valuable. They're small things, but they have a big impact sometimes if you can make that connection. Yeah, and it would be nice, wouldn't it, if people could read more often and see more often and hear more often a positive story about, you know, diversity in their communities and, you know, the contributions that immigrants make to society all around the world. It would be nice if that were the more common story than the alternative, you know, and I guess all of us are trying to make that happen.
But even doing something like that is a great way to get back. If you can interview someone, you know, even once a year, even, and just share the story of that person, and you know, from beginning, you know, like Drake says, because I'm from Toronto, started from the bottom, and where did you go, right? So you know, I think that is an important, you know, that's a great way. There's so many ways to get back, and due to the power of social media and everything else around us, it doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be fairly simple.
Yeah. So Ben, we're going to be watching out for your blog. We're expecting big things from you, from your interviews.
I've done one only as a test, so I'm trying to get my mum to do it, but I don't know if she's watching this or watches it later. So, Mum, people are waiting. Thank you, though. Thanks.
All right. Well, this has been amazing, and I am in such admiration of all of you. But I think we should probably finish there, unless anybody has any more comments that they'd like to. I feel my gin and tonic is calling from my kitchen.
I was just going to touch on the why you should do it. I think.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that we want to quickly cover that, and I think that the why part is critically important, because it allows everything else to happen. So, you know, we touched on it earlier about, you know, if you're a law firm, or you practice immigration, it's a great way. You know, it's when I started Brighter Together, I was starting off my firm. A lot was going on. My business mentor said I shouldn't do it because it was going to take off things from my plate. And listen, it did. But I had to look at it from a different perspective of saying, okay, how are we going to make this work? What is it going to do? What's the benefits? And some of the benefits, you know, we've been able to recruit a great team on core values, and this just aligns perfectly with the values that we do at Bright. And also, just even we're looking at developing a network. All of the immigrants who are donating, they're all shared. They appreciate Canada. We'll like to have networking events to grow them, help them professionally as well. So, things just snowball and snowball and snowball. And it's important. And anything you could do, just try to make it sustainable. If you just write one blog a month, just have it sustainable. Put aside that time every week, or one day, Saturday or Sunday, grab a glass of wine and do that day. Sustainability is critical, and that is the key to success in order for anything for it to get some momentum on it. So that would be my 2 cents when it comes to why you should maybe consider doing it.
Yeah, and to just do something, because I honestly, I mean, if we're being sort of truthful here, I get a bit annoyed sometimes about the whole values thing, like a company has its values and these are our values, and then you think, yeah, but how, like, what are you actually doing? Like, it's easy to write down 5 bullet points on a PowerPoint slide, but are you actually doing it? And to go and do a thing, even if it's a small tiny thing, even if it is one small tiny interview that you share to to Instagram or whatever, or like one little thing, at least it's an actual real action that you as a human tried to do to help another human. That's a good starting point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you again, you're all amazing, and have an amazing weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.